Good afternoon, everyone. We are ready to begin. I want to thank you all for joining Manatee Tiger Bay in our first meeting, celebrating. I don't know if I want to say celebrating, but I do want to make sure that we have this awareness about Child Abuse Prevention Month. And we do have some of our people up here that are going to give you some amazing information for you all to spread, to make sure that we continue to educate our community, because it is about protecting our children. And most of you know I am a youth advocate, so this means a lot to me that they have joined us, and I'm so appreciative to you all coming out today. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. My name, I always forget to say my name. My name is Xtavia Bailey, and I am your president, and I am absolutely excited to serve you this year. I want to recognize Assistant Chief Josh Kramer. I'm sorry, stand up and please recognize everything he does. He's with the Bradenton Police Department. Absolutely. Thank you for all you do. We support our law enforcement. And to Commissioner Betsy Benak, you still are commissioner. You're still a commissioner. When you serve, you're always a commissioner. When you have served the public, you are always a commissioner. When we're doing work, we are always what we have done, and those are our legacies. I do want to say, please make sure you turn off your cell phones. Please turn off your cell phones. No dancing music in the middle of us speaking. I appreciate it. Our topic today is child abuse prevention and awareness. And if you didn't know, this is Child Abuse Prevention and Awareness Month, and this is why we are bringing this to you. Our speakers today is Pam Parmenter. She's the Director of Early Learning Quality and Assessments for the Early Learning Coalition of Manatee County. We have Nathan L. Scott III, Child Welfare Policy Coordinator, Florida Department of Health. Paul Scharf, Chief Executive Officer, Early Learning Coalition of Manatee County. We have Major Connie Shingeldecker, Retired Bureau Chief, Child Protective Investigations. And we also have Cindy Spray, author of Crying Without Tears. She is also a child abuse prevention awareness advocate. And she has an amazing story, and all of our speakers have amazing information to give us. We are going to start off with Pam Parmenter, Director of Early Learning Quality and Assessments. Please give her a round of applause. If you would like to see their bios, they are online.
Hello to all of you on a great day in Florida. The Early Learning Coalition of Manatee County supports providers in our community through a couple of different avenues. First of all, through contracting with them and providing support services that way, and providing what they call child care resource and referral information to parents. But through all of that, we support the child care providers in Manatee County in a variety of ways. First of all, we are the extra set of eyes. We go out and visit in the programs, not only with services that we provide, like our STEAM mobile. We go out, we have our CATCH program, physical education and nutrition curriculum. We go out and we assess the programs for their teacher-child interaction quality. We actually measure that. We go out into the programs and provide coaching and technical assistance in the classrooms, as well as going out and monitoring, of course, their contracts, because we don't provide direct child care. But when we do, we're always that extra set of eyes to be able to say, we might want to try that a little bit differently next time. So that's one way that we help to prevent child abuse and neglect in the actual centers. Plus, in CCR&R, we are providing parents with information about what to look for when they place their children so that they are aware also of critical factors in child care. Another way that we support the providers is by the professional development. We have, one of the things we did actually is a provider came to us who had a child delivered to them, a 2-year-old. Dad said, very tired. They said, okay, we get that every day, but the child fell asleep not only at the breakfast table, started crying when they tried to get him to lie down on a cot, then fell asleep in the blocks area. So they called Grandma. Mom and Dad were separated. They called Grandma and said, I think he's a little beyond tired. You might want to watch him today, maybe get him to the doctor. Took him to the doctor, and a week later, after hospitalization, including ICU, to detox from Dad's girlfriend's pills, he was back at child care. So having them be aware of many of these things. In response to this incident, we called together a panel. Nathan spoke on the panel. We got the poison prevention person from Tampa General to come down. We had Colonel, what's the fellow's name? Todd Shear from the Sheriff's Department. We had several people, and Dr. Christy Skoglund from the Florida Center, talking on ways to prevent child abuse and neglect and the effects that some of these instances are having on the children for their lives. Another way we are doing this is to provide information about appropriate behavior and discipline. We had a conference last year where we supported the Handle with Care program, and our conference general speakers included Major Shingeldecker, speaking on resilience, showing that film, and how to help children overcome some of the ACEs in their lives, and how to handle them with care when trauma has happened. This year we have 3 different sessions from a company called Loving Guidance, Dr. Becky Bailey, on conscious discipline. So we try very hard to maintain the professional development for the providers. Another thing we do is go into the community with programs such as Operation WIT. It's a brand new program. We go out into the community. We work with parents or grandparents, the guardians, for 45 minutes, the children for 45 minutes. We do some parenting education. How can you support your children better? Including maybe there's a different way to discipline your children than hitting them. That's one of the lessons. So we're having some of those uncomfortable conversations, but introducing it through play and through supporting your children. So those are just a few of the ways that we support our families and our children. DCF, the Department of Children and Families, has a course that we are really pushing also along with Handle with Care, and that is the Director Credential Endorsement for Child Care Directors on Trauma-Informed Care. It's a 45-hour course, and if they have that badge or they have that certificate and then their staff get the 5-hour trainings, they can get a badge on their DCF child care licensing listing that shows that they can handle these children. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate everything that you do. Next, we will have our next speaker. Nathan, are you ready? Please give him a round of applause.
Thank you, Octavia. Good afternoon. I almost said good morning. My name is Nathan Scott. I am the Child Welfare Policy Coordinator. I cover Manatee, Sarasota, and DeSoto counties with the Florida Department of Health. I'm a numbers guy, so I got a lot of numbers for you to kind of set the stage for child abuse prevention and what we do here in Manatee County for child welfare. First of all, I want to point out that I did provide some handouts over there at the entrance that are about adverse childhood experiences. I'm not going to belabor that, but basically abuse and neglect are adverse childhood experiences, and research shows that the more adverse childhood experiences a child experiences, the worse the impact as they grow into an adult. So that's going to kind of set the stage. There's a lot of information just on a front and back sheet over there. But according to the American Professional Society on the Abuse of Children, African American children are removed about 2 to 3 times the rate and spend more time in out-of-home care than white children. Additionally, 77% of African American children are more likely to be removed in lieu of receiving services in-home. According to the same organization, African American children experience more ACEs that I just explained than any other group. About 61% experience at least one, and they're more likely to be exposed to multiple ACEs. So with that being said, what does that look like in Manatee County? What's the state of our child welfare system? Well, in 2020, the Manatee County Sheriff's Office Child Protection Investigators received 3,241 abuse hotline reports to investigate, and that resulted in 310 children being removed from their homes. So far in 2021 through March, we've removed 76 kids from their homes here in Manatee County. And who are these kids? 57% of them are 5 years and younger, so they are not in school. They are hopefully in Pam's, one of Pam's organizations in the daycares or in early learning. 18% are African American, who that age group makes up 9% of the population in Manatee County. Why are we removing kids? No surprise to anyone. Substance misuse and substance-exposed newborns are our #1 reason to remove kids in Manatee County, in our circuit, and across the state. Domestic violence and threatened harm would be #2, and inadequate supervision would be the 3rd reason that we remove kids here in Manatee County. And where is this happening? It's happening in zip code 34205, which is right here in downtown Bradenton, and 34207, which is the 41 corridor. 34208, Manatee Memorial Hospital, and 34221, which is in Palmetto. So as of March 31st this year, we are serving 1,429 children in DeSoto, Manatee, and Sarasota counties. 910 of those kids are in Manatee County. There's 1,052 children in out-of-home care. 682 of those kids are in Manatee County. There's 496 kids in foster care in our circuit, 316 kids in Manatee County in foster care. 60 children in our circuit in group care, 37 Manatee County kids in group homes. There are 377 children receiving services in their homes with their parents. 228 of those kids are Manatee County kids. As of March 31st, we had 388 foster beds. Approximately 211 of those beds are in Manatee County and 55 homes. Remember, 366 kids in Manatee County are in foster care, but we only have 211 foster beds. From July 20th through March 2021, 241 kids, positive news, have exited out of home care in Manatee County. 115 of those kids were successfully reunified with their parents. 59 children were put into permanent guardianship with a relative or non-relative, and 55 children were adopted. But we did have 23 kids age out of foster care. Right now, we're serving 33 Manatee kids ages 13 to 17 that are receiving independent living services, and 29 young adults from ages 18 to 23 receiving post-foster care services. 79% of those kids are in an educational program. And I think Connie's going to talk a little bit about our wonderful Handle with Care program, but I'll give you some numbers real quick before I exit. And from July 2020, so this school year, through mid-March of 2021, Manatee County School District has received 498 Handle with Care notices. Those are, November was our highest month with 81. Grades 6 through 9 received the most Handle with Care notices. It was 134. Ages 11 through 15 received the most Handle with Care notices in that age group. That was 221. And what schools? It's Southeast High, Sug Middle, Team Success, and MSA. And I'll leave those numbers with you to contemplate and hand the mic to Xtavia. Thanks for having me.
When I call on Nathan, I know I'm going to get numbers. And I love it because it actually gives us a picture of what actually is going on. And as we finish with the speakers, we'll have some questions to really dig into some of those numbers and try to find out why and what we can do as a community to help these zip codes, and especially the African American community, that these children are being removed at this rate. Something needs to be done. And so it's great that we have someone that can come in. When he says he's a numbers guy, he is a numbers guy. Thank you so much, Nathan. I appreciate that. I appreciate the numbers. Next we have next we have Major Connie Shingledecker, retired Bureau Chief, Child Protective Investigations. Please give her a round of applause as she comes.
Thank you so much. And as she mentioned, I am retired investigative bureau chief with the Manatee County Sheriff's Office, and I supervised during the last 15 years of my employment there, criminal investigations, narcotics and vice, and child protective investigations. I started in 1977 and retired in 2016, but I'm still very involved with the Sheriff's Office. I'm on the reserves, and I'm involved in a lot of other boards and things like that. So I just want to talk a little bit about how we initiated Child Protective Services. We're one of the unique counties. There were 7, now I think it's down to 6, and then went back up to 7. Kim, is that correct? It's 7 sheriff's office in the state of Florida that handle child protective investigations. That means they have partnered with the state of Florida and taken over the role and responsibility of DCF in their counties. So the sheriffs took that on, and we started it in 1997. So here in Manatee County, we've been doing it for a very long time. I do want to mention a little bit about some of the things that I'm involved with since I retired that I think are really important, and I'm going to speak briefly about Handle with Care. So how did Handle with Care start in the state of Florida? It came from West Virginia, by the way. They had a huge problem with opioid epidemic. As you know, Manatee County had a huge problem with the opioid epidemic. When we shut down the pill mills, when we got that legislation in place that cracked down on the opioids, what took its place? Heroin. So unfortunately in Manatee County, we had a large problem with the opioid, and then when that dried up, heroin took its place. So as I was retiring in 2016, that was the year that we brought in drug-endangered children. They came to our county and did a training for a group of about 100 folks that were school counselors, law enforcement from all jurisdictions and within this county, and child protective investigators. And Nathan and myself were instrumental in having that there. Drug-Free Manatee paid for drug-endangered children to come and do a training. When the training was over, and it was about 3 days, when the training was over, there were some school counselors that had come to that training, and they said, you know, we know that the number one reason why kids are being removed is substance abuse issues, and the second was domestic violence at the time. And they said, but you know what, we don't get the information. Number one, we're not getting it quick enough to understand that these children that have been removed or been exposed, let's say, to a parent overdosing in the home, we didn't get that information. So Johnny or Susie shows up at school the next day, and we have no idea that that child has been traumatized by what has happened. And so the drug-endangered people were listening, and they were saying, how can we get more information so that we can help these children the next day in school to be successful? And they said, have you heard about Handle with Care? And we said, no. Tell us, what is Handle with Care? Well, you need to be connected to West Virginia because they started it there. And it's a partnership between law enforcement and the school system, and they give information that just says this child was exposed to trauma. So when law enforcement goes out on a call, they send a one-page notice that says Johnny was exposed to trauma. They don't give any details, and it's submitted to the school at the time that right after the incident has happened, and certainly before the school starts the next day. So the teacher is going to be aware when Johnny shows up in class, Johnny was exposed to a traumatic event. There's no details about what that was. So if it was an overdose, or it was a domestic violence incident, or it was a drive-by shooting, or it was a traffic crash, there's no details. Just the simple Handle with Care. So they're supposed to be watching the behavior of the child to see, is this behavior that this child may be exhibiting the next day the result of being exposed to trauma? Because we know, as we heard, adverse childhood experiences can create problems for children. Just imagine if you saw a parent overdose or saw someone get arrested, would you be able to learn the next day in school? You'd probably be reliving that event over and over. Think about any traumatic event that you've been exposed to. You would be reliving that event over and over. And children have less resources than we as adults do to process a traumatic event. So the sharing of this information provides that teacher with a different way to look at this kid. Instead of saying, what is wrong with you, we're going to say, what happened to you? And we're going to treat that behavior differently. So that child may need to go and have some quiet time, rest, and may need to put off a test that they're not prepared to take now because they're in the throes of a traumatic event. And guess what? That means that that child may be more successful in school because the teacher recognizes how trauma impacts learning. And so it's all about making sure that that connection happens. So we started that. We learned about it in 2016. We finally initiated it with the partnership of every law enforcement agency in this county. We started in 2018, and we've been doing it ever since. And as a result of that, and Nathan was right, we were able to get some grant funding here through Drug Free Manatee, and we are now the epicenter here of Handle with Care for the state of Florida. There is so much interest being generated all around the state that we're helping other counties and agencies learn about how they can create Handle with Care in their area. One other thing I want to mention that I'm involved in, when you talk about child prevention, I'm not sure if you're aware that we have an opportunity in our recovery pods to connect with inmates that want to learn and want to improve their lives. So they're in this recovery pod, and we get to come in and talk to them. So I put together 3 women, so there's 3 of us that go into the jail in the male and female recovery pods, and we talk about child abuse and prevention, substance abuse, and the impact that it has on an unborn child and then a child that may be born later, and the impact that that can have. And we also talk about the #1 leading cause of infant death in the state of Florida and in Manatee County is asphyxia. It's preventable. What you thought was SIDS, we now know is babies, infants dying as a result of unsafe sleep, and it's generally co-sleeping. So we're educating in the recovery pod these inmates on how. Oh boy, that's my time. My time is up. Thank you. Okay, well, I'll be able to answer any more questions that you might have as we move along, but thank you so much. So happy to be here.
Thank you so much, and I'm so excited about Handle with Care. And Connie and I have dialogue about different things all the time. So now my interest is, how do we get the kids that are not being reported? So what is the next step for our educators and different people who are involved with our children? So we have Handle with Care, which is amazing because it allows, and we have teachers in the audience. I've been in the classroom, and you don't know. You don't know if Johnny, if he's tired or if he doesn't want to do, you don't know. So that communication is #1 for us to be able to help these children the right way. We'll talk a little bit more about trauma-informed training and how that also helps. I'll let our speakers do that. But next we have Paul Scharf, Chief Executive Officer for Early Learning Coalition. Please give him a round of applause as he comes.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. And Nathan, I get your emails and I read all your numbers every month. And thank you for all you do, because it's very enlightening to see those numbers. And it's sad that they're so high. But little history, the Early Learning Coalition, in 2017, I started another nonprofit called the From Cradle to College Foundation. The Early Learning Coalition is mostly birth to 5 needs, but we do take siblings up to 12. But we found in the community that there was other things that needed to be done that we couldn't utilize a coalition because of state guidelines and federal guidelines. And so we created the From Cradle to College Foundation. Well, we were looking for programs to do with this foundation, and I'll tell you the story that started it all. In 2014, a lot of you remember, in Northwest Bradenton, a guy by the name of Andy Avalos went to the neighborhood where I live, and he killed his wife and he killed a neighbor, and they had a 4-year-old son with him while he killed these people. So then he proceeds to leave there and take his child to daycare. At this time, law enforcement was aware of these murders and that it was in Northwest Bradenton, and they locked down all the schools. So if you're familiar with Northwest, there's King Middle School, and right next to it is a daycare. Creative Kids Connection was the name of it at that time. Mr. Avalos had some words with the daycare people where he took his son, but nothing happened there. He left there, and then he went and killed his priest or preacher. I'm not sure what the terminology would be for that, but he killed him, then came back and picked up his son. All the while, the schools were locked down, and the preschool had no idea. So a lady by the name of Peggy Salmons actually owned Creative Kids, and her husband was the head of the SWAT team for the sheriff's department, and she sold Creative Kids, and she came to work for the ELC. She's retired since. And she came to me and she said, Paul, this happened, and she told me the story. And after I did further study, I found that 25% of children in the state are in daycare facilities, home centers, some type of daycare or learning centers. And that when the lockdown system occurs, they're left out. So we created PEARLS, which the acronym is the Preschool Emergency Alert Response Learning System. And I get acronyms wrong all the time, so I have to read it. So PEARLS, what we decided is how it works for the lockdown is the 911 center. In some counties, sometimes it's city police, and sometimes there's more than one 911 system, like in Miami. So long story short, we work with the sheriff here and the city police departments, and there is just the one 911 system here in Manatee. And we worked it out that when they gave the school board the call for the lockdown, that they would also call the coalition. So we subcontracted from the Cradle to College to the Early Learning Coalition, and we have trained staff there. So I'll read you out the procedures of exactly what occurs. So, in addition, we also created a mapping system because coalitions, there's 29 other coalitions in the state. We're funded through federal and state dollars. It's about a $2 billion for all 30 of us. And we cover all child care providers, whether they're licensed or unlicensed. Churches and whatnot don't have to have a license. So we contract with all of them. In Manatee County, we have 175 that we do contracts with, and with state and federal money, we pay the contractors for subsidized child care. So if you work or you go to school and you can't afford to put your child in care, you come to the Early Learning Coalition and we put you into care and we help pay for it. So roll forward. So since we have all that information, we made a mapping system so that we have every child care provider who the owner and the director of that center or home we have in a mapping system, and then we also have their cell phone numbers and emails. So when the school board is told that there's a situation such as a bank robbery or somebody with a gun near King Middle School, they do a 2-mile radius, and at that time they call the Early Learning Coalition, and we punch a button with the address, and then our mapping system automatically texts and emails all of the providers that are within a 2-mile system. So in effect, everybody's locked down, and we protected those youngest children that were never protected before. So the procedure would be that law enforcement calls the coalition. We take the call. The people are trained. It's not 24 hours a day because most daycare providers are not open 24 hours, but it's from 6 to, I believe, 8 at night that we can take those calls. And we've never had an occasion that it worked out that it was in the evening. So the automated call goes out, and then after the situation is over, we send them a call back to say it's all clear. And it's up to the individual child care provider what they do. They can lock down. They can just be on guard. We give them all types of training. It's not our decision for many reasons, but we let them know that it's there. And if they want to lock down, that's good. So after we did this, we were thinking how great this program was. And we went to the state legislature, and in 2019, we created it in 2018. In 2019, we asked for state funding to carry out this program throughout the state. And we were granted that funding, and we're in this will be, if the governor signs, it's in the budget. We were allotted $800,000 over 4 years, and we were to do a mapping system and training. And I'll go into the training part second. So we got the money, and we ran into some problems with law enforcement agencies wanting to sign off on the mapping system, and the coalitions doing the calling. And it was for legal reasons or whatever. Not everybody's as understanding as Manatee County. So I think we have 7 counties that actually have the mapping system, 7 coalitions that actually have the mapping system and our training all in place. However, the whole state has our training in place. So next year, after this funding runs out, we're hoping to, there's a mapping system that all the state law enforcement have been given by the federal government to fund to map things in their areas. So I'm out. Okay. So the training portion of it is kind of unique. In the old days, back when Sandy Hook happened, they would take all the kids and put them in one room. And so the new thing is they found that they want you to jump out a window, go down the hall, run away, or throw things at the people, because apparently there's some loop something. There's some acronym where if you throw something at somebody, it gets their attention and they can't think to shoot you. So long story short, we train the children with videos and in person of what to do in those situations. And the training is it's amazing, and it's well received throughout the state. So I'm sorry I went over my time, but Pearls, it works, it's statewide, and we've also been asked to go to Texas and Connecticut, so it's a winner. Thanks.
I told them that if they go over, I'll start standing up. And that means you need to sit down. But no, thank you. So I love that program. I love that we're working with our young kids and those providers to make sure that they are saving and protecting our children. That happened right here in Manatee County, so we never know, and at least they're aware of it, you know? And if you're training the young ones, at least when it happens, you can be able to direct them, and they'll be understanding of what needs to be done to actually protect themselves. And then they won't panic, you know? We don't want to scare our kids either. Thank you so much, Paul. Please give him another round of applause. Next, we have Cindy Spray, and I'm so excited to have her with us. She's the author of a book called Crying Without Tears. She is one of those people that as a child went through some trauma and was actually able to write about it finally as an adult. And I think it's very important to hear from an advocate, but also a victim, but not a victim who remains a victim, someone who is writing about it, speaking about it, and educating people about how they can get through this and how they can deal with it. Please give Cindy Spray a round of applause as she comes.
Gosh, thank you so much for having me, Xtavia. When I found out this was your topic for the first in-person meeting, I'm like, yeah, this is a perfect fit for this, because I came from a destitute family. And, you know, I went through child abuse, sexual child abuse for nearly a decade. And when my book came out, I was so nervous about what people are how they're gonna view me now, because I know a lot of people in this community. And a calmness came over me. And it was one of those calmness that this isn't about you anymore. This is about helping others. And that's why I got the bravery, I guess, to do the book. And it was just one of those things that you got to think about it. You got to get beyond yourself and see what you can do to help. So on the back of my book, I say I'm a survivor of child abuse. Not a victim, I'm a survivor of child abuse. And at an early age, I had no choices in my future. But God chose me to be the protector of my brothers and sisters. I made a critical decision that the effects of my entire life, I chose to protect my younger siblings from living the life that I was already living. I went from being the most hated person in the family to being the most respected. I still mentor one of my siblings that suffers from PTSD, from going through what we went through in our life. And I hear about all of these programs. I'm so thankful for all that you do, because behind the scenes as a child, you don't know what's going on. You hope it's going on, but I want to tell you the biggest fear a child has when they're going through either sexual abuse, physical abuse, or witnessing abuse It's the fear of what their parents will do if you try to seek out help. That is the biggest fear a child goes through. What's my mom and dad going to do to me? Are they going to beat me? You've already been threatened that you're going to get killed. So you're scared to death of the parent more than you are of the person who's helping you. And that's what I'm here to tell people. It's one of those things that I didn't just write this story. I lived it, but more importantly, I survived it because I had a path. And I thought, okay, the path is done. I've got my younger kids out of the home. Went to my principal. Actually, when I got brave enough, I went to my principal and I said, I need help. I don't want my dad to get to my little sister. And he helped me get them out of that situation. Got my dad out of the home. Eventually had to get my mom out of the home because of the abuses that she was putting us through. It was a terrible, terrible upbringing. But I had to keep going. And I went to church, and I found a family in a church. I found a mom in a foster home, and I found my father in God. And that's what gave me the strength to keep going. And it's what keeps me going today, because the path didn't end there. The path is, okay, you lived the story. Now you have to tell it. So you can tell these people that are behind the scenes, and I appreciate everything everybody's doing, because the kids don't know what they're going through. And the program with talking to the kids at school, I say in my book, listen to what kids are saying with their eyes, because they're afraid to talk. They're not only afraid to talk about what they've gone through, they're afraid to talk about what you might do. You got to be that comforting voice. I sent my book to a P.O. box in Arkansas, and I'm going to read you a little bit of this letter. Cindy, oh my gosh, what a surprise when I received and opened your parcel and read your nice letter. I sat down immediately and started reading your book and remembering as best I could the timelines and events you referred to. I'm 79 years old, and I began working with the welfare department at least 50 years ago. I think I was a new employee when I met you. I often wondered and worried about the families we tried to help. Did it work? Did we make it better, or did we make it worse? There are no easy answers. Thank the Lord you've been able to deal with the abuse you received and have found your faith in the Lord Jesus, the greatest healer. I will keep you in my prayers and continue healing, as well as the good work you are doing in sharing your story. Thank you so much for sharing it and the work that you are doing. That's my story. I have so many other things that I want to say to every one of you. And I want to end with this. I'm going to end early. I want to say this. My goal is to share the story so with all of us, we can change lives one at a time together.
Whew, that is so, I have chills right now. Excuse me. Whew, because all the kids we mentor, all the kids we seek out to help and talk to, DCF, CPS, all of you that have worked every single day, and it's not about money, it's about those children that we are saving. Thank you. Thank you so much, because that letter came from the person who she was able to talk to and that advocated for her. So you never know when you're going to receive your book in the mail. You never know when you're going to be in someone's book. And I think that is the most honorable thing that someone can do for you. Thank you so much for coming and being a survivor today. We appreciate you. Next, I want to start and let you all know we are allowing you to ask questions to any of our panelists, okay? Today, because it is our first meeting, you do not have to be a member. I never do this, so you need to take the opportunity to ask the question today. Please do not elaborate or give any speeches. ask your question. Please be very direct. And if you have a question for a particular speaker, please call their names. 30 seconds to ask your question. If you see me stand up, you're at 32 seconds. Okay? I appreciate you so much. We will be looking for the best questions. And right now, I just want to start out. If you are wanting to ask a question, please come to the microphone. And Steve, I will ask you to be my referee. But if you do want to ask a question of any of our, or make any comments, please, please, please come over and ask the question. Our first question that I would want to start off for our panelists, how did the opioid crisis impact your work? And what did you do to contribute to this to make it better? Any one of you can come up first. Please feel welcome.
Well, I'll start off, and it had a huge impact, as you know, at the sheriff's office. And it impacted in so many different ways because I supervised narcotics and vice. So we saw the impact with our officers, and we partnered. And even in the criminal investigation division, as people were overdosing and dying, that created the investigative piece. We were overwhelmed. Our officers, I had to take burglary detectives and have them start working these opioid deaths. It was that was how bad it was. The medical examiner's office didn't have enough staff to handle the deaths. If you can recall what was going on at that time, there was even, he was on the news. Oh man, holy moly, I was like, woo! I just got going here. So,
You're good. Stop the timer.
Okay, so it impacted me in that way, and then think about all the children that were removed. Some of them lost both parents. It was just horrific, and so it impacted the sheriff's office and all of the people that I supervised in so many different ways. And we partnered with in putting Narcan in the hands of our officers. I mean, so we have come a long way. We're now saving lives. I mean, I can tell you that I see a lot of overdoses, but not nearly as many deaths as we had at one time. And I think that we can thank the fact that our officers are out there with the Narcan, our EMS folks are out there with the Narcan and bringing folks back. But now we need recovery. We need these folks that have these addictive issues, that they need to get help. And many of them are not ready and willing. You know, it takes time. But, you know, unfortunately, we're still dealing with the children that are exposed to that, and removals are high as a result of that. And so we still have a long way to go, but we understand that. And so there's another dynamic that's not represented at this table, and that's the recovery piece for that. So I can just share with you that I was so thankful when they put in the legislation, because Florida was the number one where they were giving out these pills, and that's what drove the problem. And we're educating our dentists and our physicians about other ways of helping people through their pain than to prescribe an opioid that's going to create a potential addiction. So there's a lot of folks that are not at this table, that a lot of work is being done behind the scenes, and so I thank you for the opportunity to share that.
I'm just going to add a little bit to what Connie had said, and what she was saying about having two parents die. That during this opioid epidemic was the first time that I've seen that in my career, where we remove a child and both parents pass away due to overdoses. In addition to that, about 2015, when this thing really took off, especially here in Manatee County, we rose to the #1 removal rate in the state of Florida per 100 alleged victims that were investigated. We still hover at the first, and we vacillate in between first and fifth. And sometimes, more often than not, unfortunately, in these past 5-6 years, we've been above Miami-Dade, above Hillsborough, which has much larger populations than Manatee, because this was an epicenter of the opioid epidemic. Lastly, what I'll share on kind of the negative side of that is as children are born exposed to opioids neonatally, they have what's called neonatal abstinence syndrome, where they go through withdrawals during their stay in the hospital and have to have an extended stay, usually in a NICU. Fortunately, most of them are able to come out of it. We don't know what the long-term effects of NAS are on babies. There's just no longitudinal studies at this point about it, but that's a reality of what's happening out there. But what we've done about that is that in statute, we're required to have a community alliance in every circuit, every county that is community oversight over child welfare. And here in our circuit, it's called the Family Safety Alliance, and it's where we really break down silos. It's people like Connie and Xtavia, and people come together. When Paul was talking about receiving my emails, it's all of us coming together to talk about what is happening in our child welfare community, what can we do to resolve these situations, how can we work together, break down silos, share information without breaking any confidentiality rules, and implement things like Handle with Care. So that's one of the things that we've done, that we try to do, is get people together and get people talking.
Oh, I gotta say one more thing. I'm sorry, but when he mentioned the NAS, neonatal abstinence, remember I mentioned earlier about the recovery pod and the opportunity to talk to the inmates that are a captive audience. And so I take Katie Powers from Manatee Memorial, because she talks about what these babies are going to go through, the neonatal abstinence. If you are pregnant, and we're talking to the moms and we're talking to the dads in these recovery pods, about if you have a baby and you are, either if you're on methadone or you're addicted to these drugs, your baby is going to be born and go through this withdrawal. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough, and we're going to get you through that. But then we also bring in Paola First, and Paola is with the, help me out, she's with Planned Parenthood. Okay, so what she tries to talk about is, why would you even want to get pregnant if you've got a substance addiction issue? Because your baby is going to go through that if you're not completely clean. So we're talking to the dads, the men that will potentially get someone pregnant, and educating them about, why would you not want to get this woman pregnant if she has a substance abuse issue, and the women about what's going to happen. Some of them are pregnant that are in that recovery pod, and we're able to talk to them about what's going to happen. And we have about an hour to spend with them, but it was making huge impact. So I just appreciate what these women were doing, coming into the recovery pod and talking to these inmates, and I think it was making a huge difference. COVID came along, we had to stop, but we're getting ready to get started back up again.
Thank you both. We do have some questions. Please step to the microphone and give your name, and please direct the question to the speaker or the speakers. Thank you.
My name is Lucy Malakos. I don't know who I'm directing this to. I'm just curious about where the Manatee Children's Services Group fits in with all of you.
I can take it and then you can go from there. Oh, wow. Manatee Children's Services, amazing, amazing group of people. Okay, first of all, if we have a child that is a sexual abuse victim, they are going to do a forensic interview with that child. You have to ask these questions of these young children. Now, years ago, law enforcement used to be trained to do that, lots of turnover. These folks are trained, very little turnover, and so the child goes into a very comfortable setting in there to talking to a trained person that can ask them questions in a non-leading fashion to get the information that we need to be able to move forward in a criminal investigation. And that's not just child sexual abuse, that's a child that's witnessed a homicide, a child that's been the victim of physical abuse. So we are so thankful to have them in our community. And it's pretty much a one-stop shop there. They get counseling there, and they also have a sexual abuse where they have the exam. I don't think it's done there at that particular office, but if it is, that's even better because it's a one-stop shop, and they are all trained in how to deal with these children that are victims.
Excellent question. I'm going to expand just a little bit on what Connie said. So that's our child protection team that she was talking about. In addition, Manatee Children's Services provides all sorts of programs to our families, including parents and our youth. But I think one of the big things, if we're thinking child abuse prevention, is that Manatee Children's Services leads our youth at risk staffings, which we've created here in our circuit, and it's kind of expanded throughout the Suncoast region, where we have professionals like the school or law enforcement or DJJ who are having trouble with kids before they reach deep ends of systems, before they've been removed, and the MCS calls a multidisciplinary team together to think outside the box on the school. Let's say the school refers this youth. They've done everything they can. They don't know what else to do, and we have all of these other professionals on this call to try to help brainstorm what we can do to avoid this youth or their family falling deeper and deeper into other systems. So they do take the lead on that as well.
Thank you so much for your question. Next question, please state your name and who it's for.
Thank you, Betsy Benak, and thank you all for everything that you do for this community. It's so important. And Nathan, as a county commissioner, I used to always freak out when you would come because we knew we were going to get the numbers from you. But my question is, we've heard anecdotally and read that, through COVID, because kids weren't in school, because they weren't maybe going to daycare, a lot of this was hidden. Do we have a better handle now on what it is and how we're going to face what has been happening? Because now we're a little bit behind the curve, right? So that's my question.
Anyone can come up?
I think I'm going to say something that I think Nathan needs to speak as well. We, first and foremost, most abuse and neglect occurs to children by someone that they know, trust, and love, and it's generally going to be in their own home setting behind closed doors. So what has happened is these children have been isolated from school, very limited access with the outside world, so more opportunity for these terrible things to have happened. We do know that our drownings have increased, and some of that is due to not properly supervising children while you're trying to work and do your and babysit your children at the same time. And so I'm really thankful that in Florida we opened up sooner than other areas, because that means that fewer children were then left to their own devices and no way to really communicate. So I'm going to let Nathan talk about what may be happening behind the scenes there, but just know that these children, the number one reporters of abuse and neglect are teachers and daycare workers, and number two is law enforcement. So it really then fell to law enforcement because the teachers had very limited interaction with these students. And we do know that some of the more serious physical abuse cases were much worse than they would have been, because if they had been going to school or daycare, some of those injuries would have been seen sooner, and now those children ended up probably at all children's with skull fractures and other injuries. So we do know that those numbers with more serious injuries did increase because we didn't have the opportunity to prevent the more serious injuries. But thank you for that question.
Excellent question, and Connie hit a lot of the nails on the head, and I think you're absolutely correct. So across the country, we saw a decrease in calls that went to the hotline, and the numbers show that specifically starting in late February through about the late August of last year. And as kids started to go back to school, they started to pick back up. We're almost to pre-pandemic levels for hotline calls. Interestingly enough, our removal rate did not go down. So what our investigators had noticed during that time frame was what they were responding to was much more serious than what we typically respond to, because, like Connie had said, this is now the neighbor calling the abuse report in, and it really gets to a point most of the time neighbors, I don't want to be in my business, and I'm not going to do that. Now it's to a point where it has to be their business, so of course we're responding to more tougher situations. And so we did see law enforcement jump to the number one reporter in the state. It's almost back to where teachers and school staff are in that category again. But I know that there were some trainings that came out for teachers to look for signs of abuse on these Zoom calls, and that's a difficult thing. Sometimes a child wants to communicate with the teacher, like Cindy was saying, but mom might be on the other side of that computer. And so there's really no way that teacher knows something's wrong because of that child's eyes, but they can't talk. So really, really bad predicament that it put folks in. And I heard anecdotally, I'm not sure if anybody from Hope's in the room or not, but I heard anecdotally some of our domestic violence people out there, the women who were experiencing domestic violence were more nervous of going to the shelter because of COVID than staying with the perpetrators. So we also had that situation going on. It's just a bad situation altogether. But we're 100% correct. We saw a decrease dramatically in the hotline calls across the state, but our removal rate didn't go down. So I would really be curious what the removal rate would have been if we would have stayed at pre-pandemic levels.
I'd like to say, not related to abuse, but just to education and how COVID has it caught us off guard, extremely off guard. The good thing is that the COVID dollars have enabled people like Charles's agency to get cameras and equipment that can allow us to teach from afar. And at the Early Learning Coalition, we have a program called Early Learning from Afar. But what it has done is allowed us to interact with the children. At first, it was just get your lesson online, and then it went to you could see the teacher, and now with Zoom and everything else, it's come a long way. So I don't think we're completely prepared yet, but after this next pot of money comes to the county, and I hope they spend it well on infrastructure, not roads, on education. But that was the only good thing that came out of it in case there is another pandemic, that we are able to teach those children. It's not near as good, don't get me wrong, but it's the best we can do.
I'm come to the next. So make sure, come. We're winding in on time, so I want to
Okay.
make sure our questions
No, I
are
know,
asked
you're
or
a
our
1 o'clock
comments,
girl.
and we're able to answer the questions, and so we can make sure we can hear them. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, my name is Hillary King, and I work for the Early Learning Coalition for Paul. And my question's probably geared towards Major. Handle with Care is incredible. Have so many friends who are teachers myself and know the impact it has. Obviously, we work with 0 to 5. Do you also reach out to our providers as well and let our directors know if you do? Okay.
Oh, that is a great question. And Nathan, I'm sure you're chomping at the bit. It wasn't long after we initiated Handle with Care that we did a presentation to the Early Learning Coalition. I did. And folks there said, well, wait a minute, what about the daycares? We're kicking kids out of daycare because of behaviors. And we said, oh my gosh, what if they're related to trauma? What are we doing? And so a group of us came together, created a curriculum for the daycare staff, because the last thing we wanted was to start sending them notices, but with no training on what to look for. Because again, I'll just give you a little anecdotal story. 20 some odd years ago, when I was in charge as like a sergeant, I handled a child abuse case where this little child on a playground of a daycare bit another child 32 times. It was a male toddler bit a female child 32 times. Okay, so how do you think we focused on that? Well, where was the protection for this child? Did we have enough staff? So we focused a lot on that. What would we focus on now? The behavior of that child. Why is this child behaving that way? What may be behind the settings there that's going on with this child? So it would be multi-focus. And so I really think that kind of brings out the difference. And so we wanted to talk to staff about, when you see a behavior, how can you intervene and what should you do, rather than just kicking that child out of daycare. So we've done some really great work there. We actually did some of the training online, so some of the staff could learn online. Because of COVID, we weren't able to get out there. So now that once we think we've got enough of the ELC staff trained, then we're going to be able to start submitting those Handle with Care notices to them as well.
I am really proud of Manatee County Substance Abuse Coalition. They have gone where, Star Trek, where no man has gone before. And Manatee County is adding early childhood to its Handle with Care program. This has not been done in any other area of the country, as far as I understand, so we're trend-setting once more. I am so excited about it. We have a couple people at the Early Learning Coalition who are going to be point persons who will not only receive the notices and then disseminate them to the child care providers, but we're going to get out there. The course that I mentioned before for directors, we've had 20 people go through that course so far. We had probably 200 people go through the resilience video last year, and we had another 80 stay for the other 2 sessions of the training. So we have this started in Manatee County, and we're really proud of it. Let's see where we go from here.
Hi, I'm Kim Kutch. I'm with the Department of Children and Families, and this is just a comment on a couple things. If you don't know about myfloridamyfamily.com, take a look at it. It is a system that the state has put together where you can go onto myfloridamyfamily.com and get help. If you're interested in being a foster parent, you can put your information in. If you want to be an adoptive parent, you can get information there. Also, if you're a faith-based organization, you can tell us how you can help us with the foster care system. The other thing is Peace for Minnesota. We have been working, some of us in this room, for about 3 years almost right now, trying to work to get our circuit, Manatee, Sarasota, and DeSoto County, as a trauma-informed community. And we're doing a lot of great things. And Sarasota County right now has a grassroots effort. We don't have one yet in Manatee County, but if anyone's interested, let me know. And for me personally, I've worked for DCF for a very long time through 11 counties, and I'm very fortunate to have Manatee County because it is probably the best county that I work with because everyone works together. We work very well together. We're very collaborative, and it's just a wonderful thing to see everything that happens here. Thank you.
And she is a superstar. You guys have no idea. She is a superstar for our children. Next, please.
Josh Kramer, non-member. Connie, a question for really the panel. Homelessness was a topic at our table. What challenges are there in helping out with investigations of homeless families? Nathan and Pam, what challenges are there in capturing the data that you do, especially, I would imagine, for the ACE criteria? Where would homelessness fit in that criteria? And Pam, anything for their young children?
That is a great question. Please answer it in about 30 seconds, if you can. That means 45 for Connie, but
That's really a tough question because if you're homeless because of financial issues, that's not enough to remove children from that circumstance. So we do have some older children that end up in that setting. So, but I would like to say that the Salvation Army and there's some other programs out there that take these families in and then help them find a home setting, because we know that it's really difficult for children that are homeless to learn and to stay connected in that fashion. It's easier for them to drop out of school because generally they're older. And Nathan, I don't know, do you have anything you want to say in regards to okay. We don't have much time. I know.
Just quickly, excellent question. So all I can say is when we look at the data, my zip codes that I'm giving you are where we're removing that kid from, not necessarily where, if they're homeless and living in a car, that car actually resides. So if they happen to be residing homeless in Sarasota but drive up here to Manatee and I remove here in Manatee, that's the zip code that's going to reflect. So it could be really difficult. But like Connie said, we can't remove just based on homelessness. Right, and of course. But tough situation. Affordable housing is something that we come across as a problem consistently. We used to put on case plan tasks for parents to get their kids back. They had to have stable housing, and how difficult that was for so many of our parents that it sometimes just was unachievable. And then we'd come to where we can't send them home and there's nowhere to go, but we can't terminate parental rights because that's the only thing that this person hasn't done by no fault of their own. So it's a huge issue in our area. So the answer to that would take a lot longer than 30 seconds. But if we look at zip codes for data, it's based on wherever we remove, if that helps. I think that might have been your question.
Children who are homeless do not go on the waiting list. They have immediate placement into childcare when requested.
boy, you guys did so good. Thank you so much. Give them a round of applause. I am so excited. Thank you all for joining us for our first meeting back. I'm very interested in that top number with the African American community being the number one with removal from the home. So that is something I myself, because if you look at me, I am African American. So I do think as a child advocate, it's very important to make sure that we see what's going on and how we can help those families. And all the other families that are being removed, if you want to get involved, you have Kim right here, and you have an entire panel that I am sure they are ready and able and ready for you to come on. And we have the Boys and Girls Club over here. Beth, raise your hand. I'm pretty sure you can come out and volunteer and do different things there. So we want you to get involved. I want to thank you again for attending the luncheon. Thank you to all of our speakers once again. And our next luncheon will be May 20th. The topic, we are trying to do the legislation update, but we do have some issues with them having an emergency meeting. So we might go right into immigration. So it would either be immigration or the legislation update. So I hope you all will join us. We invite you to become a corporate or nonprofit or individual member. Please visit our website, manateetigerbay.org. For my members, if you were a member last year, please see Tanya or send an email. We are actually going to be cutting you a 50% off because we really didn't have a chance to meet last year. So we appreciate you. We want you to become members. If you have any advice or any topics that you want me to cover, please let me know. Pier 22 providers complimentary valet parking for our luncheons. We thank you for the following news meeting. Charles Clapsaddle and his team. Chris, please give him a round of applause. He's always out there. He always does that, but we appreciate you. Thank you again to our members. Thank you for this luncheon, and thank you again. I hope to see you next month. I'm your president. Have a great evening.